Welcome to Across the Pitch. Let's get into it. In this video, we'll cover 4 games: Barcelona, Madrid, United, and Spurs. Yeah, I know, sorry for the wait. All right, let's talk about Barcelona's squad depth, because what we saw against Valencia was absolutely remarkable. Listen, when the lineup came out and we saw no Pedri, who's ill by the way, no Gavi, no Lewandowski, some people might have been worried. But what happened? Complete and utter domination. Let me tell you about Fermin Lopez. This kid comes in and absolutely runs the show. 2 goals, 2 assists. But it's not just about the numbers. Watch how he moves between the lines, how he creates space, how he links up with his teammates. He was involved in literally every goal Barcelona scored, every single one. That's not just good, that's exceptional. Then you've got Ferran Torres. Look, we know Ferran has had his critics, people questioning whether he's Barcelona quality. Well, how about a goal against his former club? And it wasn't just the goal. His movement was sharp, his link-up play was crisp, and he showed exactly why Hansi Flick keeps believing in him. Speaking of Flick, let's talk about his rotation policy. This is a manager who understands how to use his entire squad. He's not just making changes for the sake of it. He's making strategic decisions, keeping players fresh, and most importantly, keeping everyone involved and motivated. And I've got to mention Frankie de Jong. When Pedri's out, there's always this question of who can step up in midfield. De Jong didn't just step up, he controlled the game. That first goal he scored? Pure class. The way he drops between the center backs, the way he progresses the ball, this is the Frankie we all know he can be. You've also got young players like Pau Cubarsí, who at 18 years old is playing like he's been there for years. That pass he made for one of the goals? That's not normal for a teenage center back. Here's what's really exciting about this Barcelona team. They're not dependent on just 11 players. When you can make multiple changes and still put 7 past an opponent, yes, I know it's Valencia and yes, they're struggling, but 7 goals is 7 goals. That shows you've got quality throughout the squad. And let's be honest, this is exactly what Barcelona needed. With the Champions League heating up, with the Copa del Rey still to play for, and yes, even with the league, 7 points behind Madrid isn't impossible. You need every player ready to perform. What we're seeing now is a Barcelona squad that's starting to understand Flick's system. It doesn't matter who comes in. They know their role, they know the movements, they know what's expected. That's not easy to achieve, especially mid-season with a new manager. So when people ask me if Barcelona can compete on multiple fronts, I point to games like this. When your rotation players are putting in performances like this, when you can rest key players and still dominate, that's when you know you've got something special building. The challenge now? Consistency. Can these players maintain this level? Can they step up when called upon in bigger games? Because based on what we saw against Valencia, the quality is definitely there. The depth is there. Now it's just about bringing it out week after week. Let's talk about Barcelona's attacking masterclass against Valencia, because what we witnessed was something truly special. 7 goals from 11 shots on target. That's not just efficient, that's absolutely ruthless, and it perfectly encapsulates what Hansi Flick has brought to this Barcelona team. First, let's put these numbers in perspective. Over 100 goals in 32 games this season. Think about that for a moment. That's more than 3 goals per game on average. When was the last time we saw Barcelona scoring with this kind of consistency? You'd probably have to go back to the MSN era. But what's different here is how these goals are being scored. Under Flick, Barcelona's attacking patterns are fascinating to watch. Look at how the goals came against Valencia. The first one, that beautiful combination between Lamine Yamal and Frankie de Jong. That's not just players being creative, that's a well-drilled movement. Yamal draws the defenders, knows exactly when to release the ball, and de Jong's timing on the run is perfect. Then, you've got the near-post runs. This is something Flick has clearly been working on in training. Watch how Barcelona's attackers consistently make these darting runs to the near post, dragging defenders with them and creating space behind. It's not just about the player making the run scoring, it's about creating chaos in the defense. The second goal is a perfect example of this system working. Balde's cross finds Ferran Torres, but watch the movement before that. Multiple runners, different angles. Defenders don't know who to pick up. This isn't just talented players doing their thing. This is a coordinated attacking system at work. What's really impressive about this Barcelona team under Flick is their ability to score different types of goals. We saw combination play through the middle, crosses from wide areas, runs in behind, shots from distance. The variety makes them unpredictable and incredibly difficult to defend against. Look at how the midfield contributes to the attack. It's not just about the forwards. The midfielders are making late runs into the box. They're playing quick 1-2s on the edge of the area. They're creating overloads in wide areas. Even the center backs, particularly Kubarsi, are contributing with line-breaking passes that start attacks. The speed of the transitions is another key element. When Barcelona win the ball back, they're vertical immediately. No unnecessary sideways passing. They want to hurt teams while they're disorganized, and they have the technical quality throughout the team to execute these rapid transitions. Then there's the pressing game, which directly leads to attacking opportunities. Barcelona's press isn't just about winning the ball back. It's about winning it back in dangerous areas. Look at how many times Valencia were forced into turnovers in their own half. That's not an accident. That's by design. The movement off the ball deserves special mention. Players aren't static, waiting for the ball. They're constantly moving, creating angles, opening spaces. Watch Fermin Lopez's movement for his goals. He's always scanning, always looking for pockets of space to exploit. What's particularly encouraging is that this attacking efficiency came without several key players. No Pedri, no Gavi starting, Lewandowski on the bench. And yet, the attacking machine kept running smoothly. That shows the system works regardless of personnel. Is this sustainable? Well, that's the big question. But what we're seeing is a Barcelona team that's starting to fully grasp Flick's attacking principles. The movements are becoming more natural, the combinations more fluid, the decision-making quicker. The challenge now is maintaining this level of efficiency against stronger opposition. But with 101 goals in 32 games, it's clear that Flick has unlocked Barcelona's attacking potential in a way we haven't seen for quite some time. This isn't just about good players playing well. This is about a clear attacking philosophy being implemented to devastating effect. Let's dive deep into Barcelona's pressing game against Valencia, because what we saw wasn't just good pressing. It was an absolute masterclass in how to suffocate an opponent. Let me hit you with this stat that genuinely blew my mind. Valencia completed just 66 passes in the entire first half. 66 passes. That's not just bad, that's historically bad. Even if you're playing against prime Barcelona, you should accidentally complete more passes than that. But this wasn't an accident. This was Barcelona's pressing system working to perfection. Here's what made Barcelona's press so special in this game. First, the timing. Watch how they weren't just mindlessly running at Valencia players. This was coordinated, intelligent pressing. When Valencia's center backs had the ball, Barcelona's front four, Ferran Torres, Fermin Lopez, Lamine Yamal, and Rafinha, would start by showing them inside, cutting off the wide passing lanes. They're not trying to win the ball immediately. They're funneling Valencia exactly where they want them. Then you've got the second line of press, and this is where it gets really interesting. Frankie de Jong and Casado weren't just sitting in midfield waiting for the ball to come to them. They were actively stepping up, closing down spaces, but, and this is crucial, always maintaining their defensive structure. There's nothing random about this press. Everyone knows their triggers, everyone knows their zones. The way Barcelona set their pressing traps was beautiful to watch. They'd leave what looked like an easy pass open, but the moment Valencia took that option, bang! 2 or 3 Barcelona players would converge. It's like watching a pride of lions hunting. They make you think you've got an escape route, then suddenly you're surrounded. But here's what really impressed me. The stamina and intensity to maintain this press. Easy to do it for 15 minutes, much harder to sustain it for a full half. Barcelona didn't just maintain it, they actually seemed to increase the intensity as the half went on. Valencia couldn't breathe, couldn't build any rhythm, couldn't string more than 2 or 3 passes together. Look at the body language of Valencia's players by the 30-minute mark. They're already looking defeated, already second-guessing every touch, every pass. That's what relentless pressing does to you. It breaks you mentally as much as physically. The role of Barcelona's fullbacks in this press was fascinating too. Balde and Koundé weren't just waiting in their defensive positions. They were actively pushing up, cutting off switch passes, forcing Valencia to play through the middle where Barcelona's trap was waiting. It's high risk, high reward football, but when it works like it did in this game, it's absolutely devastating. And let's talk about the knock-on effect this press had on Barcelona's attacking play. When you're winning the ball back this high up the pitch, you don't need to be perfect in attack. You're already in dangerous areas. The opposition is disorganized, and you can create chances before they can reset their defensive shape. That's why Barcelona looked so fluid going forward, because their press was doing half the work for them. The coordination between the lines was something else. Watch how when one player went to press, his teammates would automatically adjust their positions to cover the spaces behind. This isn't just about energy and effort. This is about understanding, about reading the game, about trusting your teammates. What Hansi Flick has done here is remarkable. He's taken individual pressing talents and molded them into a collective pressing unit. The difference is crucial. Individual pressing can force mistakes, but collective pressing can completely paralyze an opponent, which is exactly what we saw in this game. This is modern football at its finest. The days of just sitting back and defending are gone at the highest level. Today's game is about controlling space through pressing, about defending by attacking, about suffocating opponents before they can even get started. And in this game, Barcelona showed they're mastering this art under Flick. The challenge now will be maintaining this level of pressing intensity against better opponents, especially in the Champions League, as that is what Barcelona fans are craving for. But if they can replicate this kind of coordinated, intelligent pressing performance, they're going to be a nightmare for any team to play against. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, because even in a 7-1 victory, Barcelona showed some concerning issues that we simply can't ignore. And as much as we want to celebrate the attacking brilliance, we need to address these problems head-on. First, let's talk about the goalkeeper situation, because it's becoming a real headache for Hansi Flick. Szczesny, look, I understand he's trying to adapt to Barcelona's style, but some of these decisions he's making are giving them heart attacks. There was that moment in this game where he came rushing out, completely mistimed his intervention, and they got lucky that there was a foul in the buildup. That's 3 games in a row now where he's had major moments of uncertainty. The problem isn't just about individual errors. It's about the ripple effect it has on the entire defense. Watch how the center backs are playing. They're not fully confident in who's behind them. That split second of hesitation, that moment of doubt about whether your keeper is going to come or stay, that can be the difference at the highest level. And speaking of clean sheets, or the lack of them, Barcelona have kept just 3 clean sheets in their last 18 games. That's not good enough for a team with title ambitions. Even in this game, against a Valencia side struggling in the relegation zone, they couldn't keep a clean sheet. The goal they conceded wasn't just about bad luck. It was about poor defensive organization, lack of communication, and individual errors combining. Let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Yes, this win cuts Real Madrid's lead to 7 points. Sounds manageable, right? But here's the reality check. Before this game, Barcelona had won just one of their previous 8 La Liga matches. 1 win in 8. That's the kind of form that loses you titles, not wins them. The inconsistency is perhaps the most worrying aspect. Barcelona can look unplayable one week, like this game, and then completely flat the next. Look at their home form in the league. It's been particularly problematic. They've dropped points in games they should be winning, especially against teams that sit deep and defend. Then there's the issue of game management. Even when Barcelona are dominating, there's this sense that they're always on a tightrope. The defensive transitions can be scary. Watch how many times today, even at 5-0 up, Valencia had opportunities to break. Against better teams, those moments will be punished. The midfield balance is another concern. Yes, they were brilliant going forward today, But there were times when the spacing wasn't right, when they were too aggressive in pressing and left gaps behind them. Better teams will exploit those spaces. Flick's high defensive line is a double-edged sword. It's great for pressing and maintaining territorial dominance, but it requires perfect coordination and a goalkeeper who's comfortable playing as a sweeper. Right now, Barcelona have neither consistently. The physical demands of this style are also worth considering. Playing this high-intensity pressing game is incredibly demanding. Can Barcelona maintain this level throughout the season, especially with Champions League knockout games coming up? The depth is there in terms of numbers, but the drop-off in quality when key players are rotated can be significant. And let's talk about the points gap. 7 points might not sound like much, but this is Real Madrid we're talking about. They've shown remarkable consistency recently. Barcelona can't afford any more slip-ups, and based on their form over the last 2 months, that's a big ask. The solution isn't simple. Flick needs to find a better balance between attack and defense, needs to settle the goalkeeper situation, and needs to find a way to make his team more consistent. The talent is clearly there. We saw that in this game. But talent alone doesn't win titles. This 7-1 win was brilliant, but it shouldn't paper over the cracks. If Barcelona want to mount a serious title challenge and win the Champions League, these issues need addressing, and quickly. Because while you can get away with these problems against a struggling Valencia side, the elite teams won't be so forgiving. Let's dive deep into Mbappe's evolution at Real Madrid, because what we're witnessing is far more than just a striker finding his scoring touch. This is about a generational talent adapting, learning, and ultimately transforming into exactly what Madrid envisioned when they pursued him for so many years. When Mbappé first arrived at Madrid, there was an understandable period of hesitation. Coming from PSG, where he was the undisputed star, he showed a commendable humility in his early matches. He wasn't trying to dominate every game, wasn't demanding every ball. Instead, he was learning the Madrid way. This initial approach, while admirable, actually held him back somewhat. The numbers were decent, but the performances lacked that signature Mbappé explosiveness. The turning point came after what he himself described as hitting rock bottom, following missed penalties against Athletic Club and Liverpool. Rather than crumble under the pressure, these setbacks seemed to liberate him. Since then, we've seen a complete transformation in his game. Look at his movement in this match against Valladolid compared to his first few months. Early in the season, he was often static, waiting for the ball in familiar positions. Now we're seeing a much more dynamic Mbappé. His first goal showcased this perfectly. It came from a beautiful combination with Bellingham, where his first touch and pass were precise, followed by intelligent movement to receive the return ball. His finish showed the confidence he's now playing with. The numbers tell part of the story. He's actually outpacing Cristiano Ronaldo's first season at Madrid. But the eye test tells us even more. Against Valladolid, we saw a complete center-forward performance. His second goal especially demonstrated his growing confidence, receiving from Rodrigo and finishing with clinical precision. He's not just waiting for chances now, he's actively creating them with his movement and link-up play. His relationship with Bellingham has become particularly special. These two have developed an almost telepathic understanding, evident in several combinations throughout the match. The tactical flexibility he's showing is remarkable too. While there's been much discussion about his preferred position and potential conflicts with Vinicius Jr., who was absent for this match, Mbappé is proving he can be effective in different roles. When played centrally, as he was against Valladolid, he's not just a target man, but a complete forward who can drop deep and create. When drifting wide, he's showing more discipline in his positioning. What's perhaps most encouraging for Madrid fans is that this feels sustainable. This isn't a purple patch of form or a hot streak. This is a world-class player who has fully understood and adapted to his new environment. The hat trick against Valladolid, completed with a confident penalty, wasn't just about the goals. It was about a complete performance that showed all facets of his evolution. The movement, the link-up play, the decision-making, and yes, the clinical finishing. Looking ahead, With Mbappé in this form and continuing to improve his understanding with his teammates, Madrid have a player who can be the centerpiece of their attack for years to come. The early adaptation period, which some critics were too quick to judge, including me, has proven to be invaluable in creating a more complete, more mature, and ultimately more dangerous Mbappé. The performance against Valladolid might not have come against one of Spain's strongest teams, but it represented another significant step forward in Mbappé's Real Madrid journey. The confidence and authority with which he's now playing suggests we're seeing exactly what Florentino Perez envisioned when he pursued this signing so persistently. Let's dive deep into Real Madrid's tactical evolution this season, particularly focusing on how they're managing their attacking structure with and without Vinicius. What we're seeing is a fascinating tactical puzzle that Carlo Ancelotti is gradually solving. The numbers tell an interesting story. Mbappé averages 1.3 goals per match without Vinicius versus 0.5 with him. But this isn't simply about two stars getting in each other's way. It's about the entire team's tactical structure and how it shifts based on personnel. When Vinicius is absent, as he was against Valladolid, Madrid's attacking shape becomes more fluid and less predictable. Mbappé has the freedom to drift across the front line, often dropping deeper to link play with Bellingham, while Rodrigo provides complementary movement from the right. This creates a more balanced attack where the threat can come from multiple angles. The role of Jude Bellingham has been crucial in making this work. Without Vinicius, Bellingham has adapted his positioning, often pushing slightly left to fill the half spaces that Mbappé vacates when he moves central. This has created a fascinating dynamic where Madrid's attack becomes more about rotational movement rather than fixed positions. What's particularly interesting is how the midfield setup changes based on the forward line. Against Valladolid, we saw Fede Valverde and Dani Ceballos providing a solid foundation that allowed the front three to express themselves. Valverde's ability to cover ground and Ceballos' tactical discipline gave Madrid the platform they needed to maintain both attacking threat and defensive stability. The emergence of Rodrigo as a more consistent threat, 5 goals and 2 assists in 6 games, has added another dimension. He's showing he can be both a scorer and creator, adapting his role based on whether he's playing with Mbappé alone or in combination with Vinicius. His tactical intelligence in choosing when to stay wide and when to come inside has been crucial in making Madrid's attack work, regardless of who's playing. But the real tactical masterstroke has been how Ancelotti has used this period without Vinicius to develop alternative attacking patterns. The team has learned to build attacks through different channels, rather than relying heavily on the left side, as they often did with Vinicius. This has made Madrid less predictable and harder to defend against. The fullbacks' roles have also evolved. Against Valladolid, we saw Raúl finally getting the start at right back instead of Lucas Vázquez, offering a different kind of support to the attack and defense. This kind of tactical flexibility shows that Ancelotti is thinking about the team's structure as a whole, not just how to accommodate his star attackers. Looking ahead, the challenge will be incorporating Vinicius back into this more balanced structure. The solution might lie in what we've seen from Mbappé's positional evolution. He's shown he can be effective playing more centrally, which could potentially allow Vinicius to maintain his wide left position without the two constantly occupying the same spaces. The defensive aspect shouldn't be overlooked either. Without Vinicius, Madrid has sometimes looked more solid defensively, not because Vinicius is a defensive liability, but because the team's shape becomes more compact and organized. Players like Valverde and Bellingham have shown they can provide both attacking threat and defensive cover, giving the team a better balance overall. This period has also allowed Madrid to develop their pressing game. Without Vinicius, who typically stays high up the pitch, the team has sometimes pressed more cohesively, with Mbappé leading the press and the midfield pushing up behind him. The challenge will be maintaining this defensive organization while reintegrating Vinicius's explosive attacking talent. The key moving forward will be flexibility, having multiple tactical approaches available depending on the opposition and available personnel. What this period has shown is that Madrid aren't dependent on any single approach or player. and that might be their biggest strength as they push for titles on multiple fronts. Let's analyze Real Madrid's commanding position in the La Liga title race. Because what we're witnessing isn't just about the points gap, it's about how they've built this advantage and what it means for the rest of the season. Madrid now sits 7 points clear of Barcelona and 4 points ahead of Atletico Madrid, a position that seemed unlikely just a few months ago. What makes this lead particularly remarkable is how they've achieved it despite being far from their best for significant stretches of the season. Look at how the narrative has shifted. After Barcelona's 4-1 victory over Real Madrid early in the season, there were questions about Madrid's ability to compete. Yet here we are, with Madrid in a position of strength, having shown remarkable resilience and adaptability. This isn't just about other teams dropping points. It's about Madrid's ability to grind out results even when not playing their best football. The journey to this position tells us a lot about this Madrid team. They've managed to build this lead during a period of significant transition. New players like Mbappé have had to adapt. Key players like Vinicius have been in and out of the team, and Ancelotti has had to constantly adjust his tactical approach. Yet through all this, they've climbed to the top of the table. What's particularly interesting is how Madrid have achieved this without consistently hitting the heights we know they're capable of. Against Valladolid, we saw glimpses of their potential: the fluid attacking movement, the clinical finishing, the tactical flexibility. But for much of the season, they've won games through determination and individual quality rather than sustained excellence. This speaks to the team's mentality. Even in games where they've started slowly, as they did against Valladolid before Mbappé's opening goal, they've found ways to take control and impose themselves. This ability to win even when not at their best is a classic hallmark of championship-winning teams. The timing of their current form is crucial too. As we enter the business end of the season, Madrid appear to be hitting their stride. Mbappé is in his best form since joining, scoring his first hat-trick for the club. Bellingham continues to influence games from midfield, and players like Rodrigo are providing valuable contributions. With Vinicius set to return, they'll have even more firepower at their disposal. Looking at the challenges facing their rivals makes Madrid's position even stronger. Barcelona's inconsistency has been their undoing. They've been brilliant in some big games, but dropped crucial points against lesser opposition. Atletico Madrid, despite their impressive unbeaten run, have also stumbled recently, drawing games they needed to win to keep pace. The schedule ahead also favors Madrid. While they still have some tough fixtures to navigate, including matches against both Barcelona and Atletico, they're in a position where they can afford to drop some points and still maintain their lead. This isn't just about the 7-point cushion, it's about the psychological advantage of knowing they don't need to win every game. However, Ancelotti and his team will be well aware that La Liga titles aren't won in January. The challenge now will be maintaining this momentum while also competing in the Champions League. The depth of the squad will be crucial, and the manager's ability to rotate effectively while maintaining performance levels will be key. The return of key players like Vinicius could be the final piece of the puzzle. If Madrid can successfully integrate returning players while maintaining their current form, they could actually strengthen their position further. The prospect of a fully firing Madrid attack with Mbappé, Vinicius, Rodrigo, and Bellingham all in form is a frightening one for their rivals. This position in the title race isn't just about the points gap, it's about momentum, about growing confidence, and about a team that seems to be finding its best form at exactly the right time. The challenge now is to maintain this trajectory and convert this strong position into actual silverware. Let's dive deep into the emerging partnerships at Real Madrid, particularly focusing on how these new connections are reshaping the team's identity and playing style. The Mbappé-Bellingham connection is becoming something special, something that transcends typical on-field relationships. Against Valladolid, we saw this perfectly illustrated in their combination for Mbappé's first goal. The understanding between them isn't just about technical quality. It's about spatial awareness and anticipation. Bellingham seems to instinctively know when Mbappé will make his runs, while Mbappé has adapted his game to take advantage of Bellingham's ability to find pockets of space. But it's not just about the Mbappé-Bellingham axis. The entire team is developing interesting partnerships across the pitch. Fede Valverde's relationship with the forward line has evolved significantly. His ability to cover ground and provide both defensive security and attacking support has been crucial in allowing the more creative players to flourish. Against Valladolid, we saw how his positioning and work rate created the platform for others to express themselves. The defensive partnerships are equally important. The decision to start Raul at right back instead of Lucas Vazquez showed Ancelotti's trust in new combinations. The way the defensive unit communicates and covers for each other has improved significantly in this game. Even when one defender steps out to press, there's a clear understanding of how the others need to adjust their positions. Looking at the bigger picture, these partnerships are creating a more sustainable model for success. Rather than relying on individual brilliance, which Madrid certainly have in abundance, they're building a system where different combinations of players can maintain the team's level of performance. This was evident against Valladolid, where despite some rotation, the team's basic principles remained intact. The real test of these partnerships will come in bigger games, particularly in the Champions League. However, what we're seeing is promising. The team is developing multiple ways to hurt opponents. Whether through quick combinations between Mbappé and Bellingham, Valverde's driving runs from midfield, or the increasingly confident build-up play from the back. What's particularly encouraging is how these partnerships are developing without sacrificing individual expression. Mbappé still has the freedom to take on defenders. Bellingham can still make his trademark runs into the box. But now these individual actions are better supported by understanding teammates. The return of Vinicius will add another dimension to these partnerships. The challenge will be integrating him without disrupting the chemistry that's developing. However, the fluid nature of Madrid's current attacking play suggests they could accommodate another top player without losing their coherence. These partnerships aren't just about the present, they're laying the groundwork for Madrid's future. With Bellingham at 21, Mbappé at 26, and several other key players in their prime or approaching it, these relationships on the field could define Madrid's play for years to come. The way they're combining technical quality with tactical understanding suggests Madrid are building something that could dominate European football for the foreseeable future. Where do we even start with this game? Let me tell you, this was one of those matches you just want to wipe from your memory. Pure, distilled football mediocrity. And I'm not even exaggerating here. The stats back this up. We're talking about the lowest XG game in 2 seasons of Premier League football. Think about that. 2 whole seasons of football, and this game managed to set the bar for attacking futility. You know things are bad when both teams combined can't even create one expected goal between them. Fulham managed 0.67 XG, and United? A whopping 0.25. That's not just bad, that's historically bad. We're talking about professional footballers here, playing at the highest level, and they're creating chances that wouldn't trouble a Sunday league keeper. Let me put this in perspective for you. Manchester United, one of the biggest clubs in world football, managed 1 shot on target. 1. And even that was a deflected effort from Lisandro Martinez that somehow found its way in. That's not a game plan. That's footballing poverty. When your only shot on target is a deflected effort from your center back, you've got serious problems. The first half was particularly painful to watch. You had 2 teams who looked like they just met each other in the parking lot before kickoff. No cohesion, no patterns of play, just 11 players on each side looking like they were playing different sports. The ball was spending more time in the air than a budget airline. I've watched a lot of football in my time, but this was special. And not in a good way. You know those games where you find yourself checking your phone every 2 minutes? This was worse. This was the kind of game where you start reading the match program out of sheer boredom, then the small print on your ticket, then start counting the seats in the stadium. The technical quality was non-existent. Basic passes going astray, crosses hitting the first man, players taking touches that looked like they were wearing Timberlands. It was like watching a game being played underwater. Everything was slow, predictable, and painful to watch. And here's the kicker: neither team even looked that bothered about winning. It was like watching two teams trying their hardest not to lose rather than actually trying to win. The intensity level was somewhere between a preseason friendly and a testimonial match. Look, I get it. Not every game can be a classic. Not every match can be a 7-goal thriller. But there's a minimum standard we expect from Premier League football. And this game didn't just fail to meet it. It took that standard, buried it 6 feet under, and then built a parking lot on top of it. The fact that United won this game almost makes it worse. Because results like this paper over the cracks. This isn't sustainable. This isn't progress. This is just pure, unadulterated football terrorism. When the highlight of your game is a deflected shot from a defender, you know you've witnessed something truly special, and not in a good way. So yeah, 3 points? Great. But let's not kid ourselves. This was the kind of game that makes you question your life choices as a football fan. The kind of game that makes you wonder if you should have taken up stamp collecting instead. At least stamps don't disappoint you like this. Let's talk about Rasmus Højlund, because what we witnessed in this match was genuinely concerning. Look, I've been trying to defend this kid, trying to see the potential. But at some point, we have to call it what it is. These aren't just growing pains anymore. This is a fundamental problem with his game. Let's break down those numbers, because they tell a story that's even worse than what your eyes saw. 6 completed passes out of 8 attempted. That's it. That's all he managed in nearly an hour of football. No shots. 0. A striker playing for Manchester United, and he couldn't manage a single attempt on goal. But it gets worse. He lost 9 aerial duels, got dispossessed multiple times, and managed just 1 touch in the opposition box. These aren't the statistics of a £72 million striker. These are the numbers of someone who looks completely out of his depth. But forget the stats for a moment. Let's talk about the basics of being a striker, because that's where the real concerns lie. His hold-up play is non-existent. Every time the ball comes to him, it's like watching someone try to control a bouncing balloon in a hurricane. He's backing into defenders and getting ragdolled like he's playing against his older brothers in the backyard. This is a guy who's supposed to be physically imposing, who's supposed to have this incredible athletic profile, but he's getting bullied by every center back he comes up against. The most frustrating part? He seems to have completely forgotten what made him interesting in the first place. At Atalanta, this was a kid who knew how to run the channels, who could stretch defenses, who had that raw, explosive potential. Now, he's trying to play like he's Mark Hughes or Didier Drogba, backing into defenders and trying to hold the ball up and failing miserably at it. It's like he's watched some Premier League highlights compilation and decided to completely reinvent himself as a player he's not. Remember when we used to laugh at Lukaku's first touch? Well, Højlund's making Lukaku look like Berbatov out there. The ball's bouncing off him like he's wearing steel-toed boots. And the worst part is, this isn't just one bad game. This is becoming a pattern. The stats don't lie. He's failed to score in 36 out of his 48 appearances for United. That's not a rough patch. That's a crisis of confidence and ability. You know what's really telling? When the ball's being played into him, you can see the midfielders already turning around and getting ready to defend because they know it's not sticking. They know it's coming straight back. That's not what you want your teammates thinking when they're trying to build attacks. Let's put this in perspective. We're not asking him to be Erling Haaland here. We're not even asking him to be the finished article. But what we are asking for is some basic competency in the fundamental aspects of being a striker. Hold the ball up occasionally. Make a run that makes sense. Show anything that justifies not just the price tag, but even the starting position. The truth is, right now, he's probably the worst starting striker in the Premier League. And I don't say that lightly. Look around the league. Even the relegated team's strikers are offering more than what we're seeing from Højlund. Carlton Morris at Luton, Cameron Archer at Sheffield United. They might not be world beaters, but at least they know what they're supposed to be doing out there. The fact that he got hooked after 55 minutes tells its own story. But what's even more telling is that nobody was surprised. Nobody was sitting there thinking, oh, that's harsh on the kid. If anything, people were wondering why it didn't happen sooner. That's where we're at with Højlund right now, a 72 million pound striker who's becoming a liability rather than an asset. We can talk about potential all day long, about his age, about the team's service to him. But at some point, you have to show something. Anything. Right now, we're watching a player who looks completely lost, who's regressing rather than progressing, and who's showing no signs of understanding what's required at this level. It's beyond concerning. It's becoming a crisis. Let's talk about Lisandro Martinez today, because in a game that was honestly devoid of quality, he managed to be the difference maker. And it's not just about the goal, though we'll definitely get to that. It's about what he brings to this Manchester United team that's honestly struggling for any kind of identity right now. First, let's address the elephant in the room, that goal. Yes, it was deflected. Yes, it probably wasn't going in without that massive deviation off the defender. But you know what? Sometimes that's exactly what you need in these dire matches. He had the courage to take the shot, to try something different when everyone else was playing it safe. And in a game where they managed exactly one shot on target, which was this goal, you have to give him credit for at least making something happen. But let's dig deeper into his performance, because what Martinez brings to this team goes way beyond that fortunate strike. In a team that's struggling immensely with build-up play, he's often the only one showing any kind of progressive intent with the ball. Every time he gets possession, you can see him looking forward, trying to break lines, trying to find those fizzing passes into the attacker's feet. The contrast between him and some of their other defenders is stark. While others are happy to pass sideways and backwards, Martinez is constantly trying to advance the ball. His passing range is exceptional for a center back, and more importantly, he has the bravery to attempt these passes. In a team that often looks scared to take risks, that's invaluable. However, we need to talk about that tackle on Adama Traore, because it's becoming a bit of a concerning pattern. This is the second time this season we've seen Martinez go in for these two-footed jumping tackles. The first was against Palace at the start of the season, and now this one. He's gotten away with both, but let's be honest. He's playing with fire here. One mistimed challenge like that, and we're not just looking at a red card, we're potentially looking at seriously injuring someone or himself. It's part of what makes Martinez who he is, that aggressive front foot defending style. He plays on the edge, and that's largely what makes him effective. But there's a fine line between playing with intensity and being reckless, and he's walking that line a bit too closely at times. That said, what's really impressive about Martinez is how he's adapted to what this team needs. When they're struggling to create, he steps up with his passing. When they need defensive solidity, he provides it. When they need someone to take a risk and try something different, like this game with the shot, he's willing to be that guy. In a squad full of players who often seem afraid to take responsibility, he's always willing to put himself out there. His partnership with Harry Maguire has been interesting to watch develop. They complement each other well. Martinez with his aggressive style and progressive passing, Maguire with his more traditional defending and aerial presence. It's not perfect, but in a season where very little has worked consistently for United, this partnership has shown some promise. What's particularly noteworthy about Martinez is his ability to read the game. Yes, he's aggressive, but it's usually calculated aggression. He knows when to step out and when to hold his position. His positioning often allows him to make these progressive passes. He's not just blasting long balls forward, he's finding angles and spaces that others don't see. Looking ahead, Martinez needs to be one of the players this team is built around. His mentality, his technical ability, and his leadership qualities are exactly what United need more of. Yes, he needs to curb some of his more reckless tendencies, but you don't want to completely remove that edge from his game. It's part of what makes him special. In a match that will largely be forgotten for its lack of quality, Martinez provided the moment that mattered. But more than that, He showed why he's become so important to this United team. In a season of uncertainty and inconsistency, he's becoming one of the few players you can genuinely rely on to perform at a high level consistently. Let's break down Manchester United's systemic issues, because what we saw at Craven Cottage wasn't just a one off poor performance. It's symptomatic of deeper problems that are plaguing this team under Ruben Amorim. And we need to be honest about this, because 3 points shouldn't paper over these fundamental cracks. Let's start with the build-up play, because it's absolutely tragic right now. We've got Andre Onana, who was supposed to be this ball-playing goalkeeper who'd revolutionize our build-up. But let's be real, about 90% of his long passes are ending up either out of bounds or straight to the opposition. The myth of Onana as this elite distributor is being exposed week after week. Yes, he can do those short, line-breaking passes, but anything beyond that is a complete lottery. Then you look at the back three. We've got Maguire and Lissandro, but then we're asking Mazraoui to play in that right center-back role where he looks completely uncomfortable. The whole system requires these players to be confident on the ball, to progress it through the thirds. But what we're seeing instead is this hesitant, sideways passing carousel that goes nowhere. The midfield setup is another major issue. Playing Ugarte and Bruno together, it's just not working. There's no cohesion, no understanding of space, and most worryingly, no consistent ability to progress the ball. Bruno's trying to do everything himself, dropping deep to collect the ball because the buildup behind him is so poor, but then they've got no one in those advanced areas to actually create chances. The wingbacks are perhaps the biggest problem in this system. Dalot and Mazraoui, they're just not attacking wingbacks. They're playing a system that demands dynamic, attacking wingbacks, but they've got two players who are essentially defensive fullbacks trying to play these roles. It's like trying to fit square pegs into round holes, and it's killing their attacking potential. The most damning stat? 0 big chances created. In 90 minutes of Premier League football, they couldn't create a single clear-cut opportunity. Their only shot on target was a deflected effort from a center back. That's not just poor, that's catastrophic for a club of Manchester United's stature. But here's the real concern. This isn't just about personnel. This is about a fundamental disconnect between the system Amorim wants to play and the players he has at his disposal. He wants to play this 3-4-2-1 system, but they're effectively playing a 5-2-3 most of the time because the wingbacks aren't providing that attacking thrust. You look at how deep they're sitting, how they're struggling to maintain any kind of sustained possession in the opponent's half, and it's clear this is a team that's lost its identity. They're not good enough defensively to be a defensive team. They're not creative enough to be an attacking team. And they're not organized enough to be a possession team. They're caught in this tactical no man's land. The really worrying thing is that we're not seeing any signs of improvement. If anything, the team looks more disjointed with each passing week. Players are getting more hesitant, more afraid to take risks, and as a result, they're becoming painfully predictable to play against. And yes, they got the win this match. But let's be honest. This kind of performance against a better team would have resulted in a comfortable defeat. They can't keep relying on individual moments or deflected shots to bail them out. There needs to be a clear plan, a clear style of play, and right now, there isn't one. The clock is ticking on the January transfer window, and while new signings might help, they won't fix these fundamental issues overnight. This is about coaching, about having a clear tactical identity, and about having players who can execute that tactical plan. Right now, they're missing all 2 of those elements. Until these systemic issues are addressed, they're going to keep seeing performances like this. Turgid, uninspiring displays where they're hoping for a moment of individual brilliance or a lucky break to get them through. That's not sustainable for a club of Manchester United's size and ambition, and something needs to change quickly. Right, let's talk about this second half collapse from Spurs because, honestly, I've never seen anything quite like it. 1-0 up at halftime against a Leicester side that hadn't won in 7 games, and within minutes, literally minutes, it's all gone. Let me paint the picture for you. Richarlison gets them ahead, decent header, and you're thinking, Okay, maybe this is the day they turn it around. The first half wasn't brilliant, but they're ahead, they're at home, and Leicester have been awful lately. This should be straightforward, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. Whatever was said in that dressing room at halftime, whatever the mindset was, it completely backfired. 3 minutes into the second half, 3 minutes, and Jamie Vardy's equalized. Before anyone can even process what's happened, before the crowd can even voice their frustration, bang! El Khanousi makes it 2-1 to Leicester. And here's what's actually frightening about this collapse. It's becoming a pattern. They've now dropped 21 points from winning positions this season. 21 points. That's not just bad, that's historically bad. If they'd held on to even half of those points, they'd be in European contention rather than looking nervously over their shoulders at the relegation zone. The defending for both goals, I mean, where do you even start? The first one, they're backing off. Backing off. Nobody wants to make a challenge. For the second, it's like they're playing in slow motion while Leicester just cut through them. It's schoolboy stuff, and that's being harsh on schoolboys. But here's what really gets me. This wasn't some tactical masterclass from Leicester. They didn't come out in the second half with some revolutionary new system. They just played with basic intensity and desire, and Spurs completely folded. The space they gave Leicester, the time on the ball. It's like they forgot everything about defensive positioning. You know what's mad? This is the same team that was rock solid at the start of the season. Same players, same system. But now they look terrified every time the ball comes near their box. The confidence has just evaporated. You can see it in the body language. Heads drop after the first goal, and by the second, you could feel the resignation in the stadium. And let's be honest, this isn't just about today. We've seen this movie before. Against Everton, against West Ham, against teams they should be beating. Get ahead, look comfortable, then completely lose their heads. The game management is non-existent. It's like they don't know how to handle being in front anymore. 21 points dropped from winning positions. Let that sink in. That's not bad luck. That's not coincidence. That's a fundamental problem with how they're set up and how they react to pressure. It's the difference between being in a European fight and being in a relegation scrap. The worst part? Leicester barely had to work for it. They just had to stay in the game and wait for them to implode. And they did, right on cue, just like they've been doing all season. If they don't fix this, and fix it fast, they're in serious trouble. Because teams know now. Just stay in the game against Spurs and they'll give you chances. They'll give you the game, gift wrapped with a bow on top. Listen, we need to talk about this injury crisis at Spurs because it's becoming the go-to excuse, but the reality is way more complex than that. Yes, they're missing key players. James Maddison being out for this game was a massive blow, and you can list off the others. Van de Ven, Romero, Bissouma, Son. I get it. The injury list is longer than my Christmas wish list. But here's where this whole narrative starts to fall apart. Look at the starting 11 they put out against Leicester. Really look at it. They've still got international players all over the pitch. Richarlison, who Brazil calls up, Kulusevski, who starts for Sweden, Pedro Porro, who's been in Spain squads. These aren't Sunday League players they're throwing out there. And let's talk about Leicester for a minute. This isn't the Leicester of Vardy in his prime or Mahrez doing bits. This is a Leicester team that had lost seven straight games coming into this. They're fighting relegation, they've got their own injury issues, and their squad depth isn't exactly Premier League quality right now. The pundits are absolutely right on this one. Even with their injuries, man for man, Spurs had the better team on that pitch. That's just facts. But what did they do with it? Absolutely nothing after going ahead. The organization was non-existent. The tactical setup was naive at best. And the defensive structure, well, what defensive structure? Here's what really gets me about using injuries as an excuse. It completely ignores the fundamental issues we're seeing. When you're missing players, sure, you might lose a bit of quality, you might lose some fluidity in attack, but basic defensive organization? That's coaching. That's preparation. That's having a system that players can slot into. Look at other teams dealing with injury crises. Look at what Arola's doing at Bournemouth. They've got just as many injuries as Spurs, but they've got a clear system, clear principles. Players come in, they know their jobs. Newcastle earlier in the season, same thing. Howe had half his team out, but still had them organized, still had them competing. And let's be honest, some of these injuries, the way they're picking them up, that's on them too. The intensity Spurs are trying to play with, the lack of rotation early in the season when they had players available, the way they're rushing players back. It's a crisis partly of their own making. But here's what really bothers me. Using injuries as the main excuse is letting everyone off the hook for the real problems. Why are they so tactically inflexible? Why can't they adapt their style when they're clearly struggling? Why do they keep making the same defensive mistakes week after week? Even with a fully fit squad, we were seeing some of these issues. Remember the Arsenal game? The Chelsea collapse? They had more players available then, and we still saw the same patterns. Poor game management, tactical naivety, defensive disorganization. I'm not saying injuries aren't a factor. Of course they are. But they're being used as a shield to deflect from deeper problems. They've got enough quality in that team to be doing better than this. Much better. Look at teams like Brighton, Aston Villa. They've shown you can compete, can play good football, even when you're missing key players. But it requires adaptation, requires tactical flexibility, requires better organization. So, yes, let's acknowledge the injury crisis. But let's not use it as a get out of jail free card for everything else that's going wrong. Because if they do that, they're never going to address the real issues that are holding them back. Look, we need to have a real conversation about Ange Postecoglou, and I mean a proper, honest conversation. Because right now, what we're seeing is starting to look less like stubborn principles and more like tactical suicide. Let's start with this whole Plan B situation. Everyone loves to talk about playing beautiful football, about having an identity, about sticking to your principles. That's all well and good when you've got your first choice 11, when things are clicking. But they're not in that situation anymore, are they? What we're seeing now is almost like watching someone try to play chess without their queen and both rooks, but still attempting the exact same opening moves they'd use with a full set. It doesn't make sense. It's not brave. It's not principled. It's just plain stubborn. That high line they're playing, that's not bravery. That's negligence. They're asking players to do jobs they're simply not equipped to do. And Spurs are doing it game after game, regardless of the opposition, regardless of the personnel they have available. And let's talk about that halftime team talk today, because whatever was said in that dressing room needs to be investigated for crimes against football. 1-0 up, at home, against a team that hadn't won in 7 games. What exactly was the message? Lads, let's go out there and pretend we've never played together before. Because that's what it looked like. 3 minutes. 3 minutes is all it took for everything to fall apart in the second half. That's not bad luck. That's not individual errors. That's systematic failure. That's a team coming out completely unprepared for what they were about to face. Now, I understand Ange has credit in the bank from that early run. The football was exciting, they were scoring goals for fun, everyone was loving life. And yes, they're still in 3 cup competitions. But let's be real here. They're not going to win any of them playing like this. Liverpool will tear them apart if they play this high line at Anfield. The pressure is mounting, and it's mounting fast. 4 straight league losses, 1 win in 11. These aren't just bad results. This is the kind of run that gets managers sacked. And yes, I know people will point to the injuries, but that's exactly when you need to show your tactical flexibility, your ability to adapt. What really concerns me is the post-match comments, talking about how they could still do incredible things this season. After that performance, after watching your team completely capitulate in 3 minutes, it's starting to sound less like optimism and more like delusion. And here's the thing, the players clearly like him. The fans want to believe in him. There's still goodwill there. But goodwill doesn't win you football matches. Neither does stubbornness dressed up as principles. They're now in a situation where teams know exactly how to play against them. They know Spurs will push high. They know they'll leave spaces. They know they'll keep trying to play out from the back, even when it's clearly not working. That's not having an identity. That's being predictable. What's really frustrating is that we've seen this before with other managers who refuse to adapt. It always ends the same way. The results get worse, the excuses get more desperate, and eventually something has to give. I'm not saying Angi should be sacked, far from it, but something needs to change, and fast. Because right now, his tactical inflexibility isn't just costing them points, it's starting to look like it could cost them their Premier League status. And if that sounds dramatic, just look at the table. Look at their form. Look at how teams are playing against them now. We need to see some adaptation, some tactical flexibility, some recognition that what worked in August might not work in January with half your first team missing. Otherwise, all those early season good vibes are going to feel like a very distant memory very soon. Let me break down what's really going on at Tottenham right now, because this isn't just about this result. This is about systematic failures at every level of the club. It's January 28th of January. They're sitting here in an injury crisis that everyone could see coming from a mile away. And what have they done in the transfer window? Signed a backup goalkeeper. That's it. That's the grand total of their January business so far. A backup goalkeeper who, by the way, didn't exactly cover himself in glory for Leicester's first goal. You want to know how ridiculous this is? They've got center backs playing at fullback, midfielders playing in defense, and kids on the bench who probably still need their parents' permission to stay up for late kickoffs. Meanwhile, Daniel Levy's sitting up in that director's box like everything's fine. Everything is not fine, Daniel. They're 15th. 15th! And let's really digest that position for a minute. 15th in the table. This is Tottenham Hotspur, not some newly promoted side just happy to be here. They've got one of the best stadiums in world football, but right now they're closer to the relegation zone than they are to the top half of the table. They've got 8 points between them and the bottom 3. What makes this even more painful is the timing of this collapse. They were flying at the start of the season, playing exciting football, everyone buying into Ange's vision. And now they're watching Leicester, a team that hadn't won in 7 games, come to your ground and turn you over. Leicester, who couldn't buy a win lately, who've been in absolute freefall, just walked into your backyard and took 3 points like it was nothing. But here's what really gets me. This feels like a movie we've seen before. Different manager, same script. They start well, everything looks promising, and then the wheels come off. And every single time, the club's response is the same. Paralysis. Complete and utter paralysis in the transfer market when they desperately need reinforcements. You look at other clubs when they're in trouble. They act. West Ham's out there trying to sign players. Even Forest, even Everton, with all their financial issues, they're at least trying to strengthen. What are Spurs doing? Apparently working hard behind the scenes, according to the club. Well, I'll tell you what working hard looks like. It looks like signing actual players who can help the team, not just issuing statements about how difficult the January window is. The most damning thing about all this is that it was preventable. Everyone could see they needed depth in defense. Everyone could see they were running players into the ground early in the season. But instead of addressing these issues in the summer, instead of backing the manager properly in January, they're sitting there watching the same problems get worse and worse. And you know what's really scary? This isn't even rock bottom yet. They've got Liverpool in the cup, they've got tough league games coming up, and at this rate, they're going to be going into them with the same depleted squad, the same issues, and apparently the same complete lack of urgency from the people running the club. This isn't just a bad run of form anymore. This is a club in crisis. And the most frustrating thing is that the solutions are obvious. They need players. They need them now. Not in the summer. Not when it's convenient. Not when they can get them on the cheap. Now. Because if they keep going like this, if they keep pretending everything's fine while they slide down the table, they're going to find themselves in serious trouble. And the worst part? The absolute worst part? Leicester winning today proves that you can turn things around if you want to. They came to Spurs on the back of 7 straight losses and found a way to win. Meanwhile, Spurs fans are still waiting for the club to show any sign that they understand the gravity of their situation. It's not good enough. Not for a club of this size, Not for these fans, and certainly not for a manager who deserves better backing than this. All right, then. If you made it this far, I really appreciate you. This has been Across the Pitch, over and out.